Before we begin, it is of utmost importance that I tell you. This video was brought to you by Raycon. I also feel compelled to remind you that the newest model of the Everyday Earbuds packs in more features than ever. The Everyday Earbuds still offer up to 32 hours of battery life using the charging case, and now you even get wireless charging and quick charging. Multi-point connectivity lets you connect to multiple devices at once. These things even sport active noise cancellation now. And as always, these are the sleekest and most comfortable earbuds I've ever used. I can essentially wear them all day without worrying about them falling out or becoming uncomfortable. I've been trying to get outside more, and I literally always bring my Raycons along because chill tunes make everything objectively better. And check out this super slick case. There are a bunch to choose from, and you don't even have to take them off when you charge up. The Raycon Everyday Earbuds pack a ton of value into one package, and they are still about half the price of other premium brands. You can also get 15% off the entire Raycon store if you hit the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/Arlo. Thanks again to Raycon. Video now. Skaboof? 2024 was a very weird year for me. I mean, I've always been pretty bad about, actually playing all of the awesome video games I'm always talking about. I've got a busy life, and I tend to get to the end of each year wishing I could have given everything a go so I could end up with a really solid and definitive best of list. But it is what it is, and this year, I can tell you right now, was particularly unconducive to me simply sitting down and playing video games. I went through a somewhat nightmarish move out of state, and a lot of the year was spent just kind of adjusting to this big change and kind of working on myself and overall doing a lot of non-game related things. So if each year my best of list tends to be kind of cobbled together and weird, that goes double this time around. For that reason, I'm actually splitting the games up into 3 distinct categories. Let's cover the less traditional ones first, and then we'll get to the main attraction. So to kick things off, I would like to very briefly give you the top 4 games I started in 2024 and really loved, but genuinely didn't have time to finish. Coming in at number 4, we've got Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. It's a game I treasure, and a remake that looks absolutely gorgeous and gets almost everything right. I had a ton of fun streaming the first couple chapters, but then other games just kept coming out. And since I've already played the original Thousand Year Door so many times, new experiences unfortunately took priority. Number 3, another Crab's Treasure. A colorful, more family-friendly Soulslike with clever 3D platforming elements and a wealth of undersea puns. It is a formula that appeals to me greatly. I loved what I played, but unfortunately, this is another game I streamed a little and then immediately got distracted away from. And I have to promise myself that I will finish it later, and I will finish it later, but later is unfortunately not right now. Number 2, Mario and Luigi Brothership. This is a game I really actually do think I am going to continue. I am still playing it, but at the time of this recording, I'm still relatively early in the game, and therefore I can't know for sure. However, I really do love what I've played. I'm still having a great time. The game has certainly got a lot of problems, but so far, none of them have been enough to stop me from enjoying the experience. And finally, number 1, that's right, it's a cheat. It's not a game that came out in 2024 at all. I can't even pretend to fudge it, only a cheat, but I don't care. I finally started a file in Dark Souls 3. I finally got around to it, and then, of course, discovered that I didn't have the dozens and dozens of hours I want to give it, so I have had to shelve it temporarily. And at least so far, it hasn't quite clicked with me like the other games did, but I have no doubt that when I can finally dig into it, I will become thoroughly obsessed. That's it for the games I started and regrettably didn't get to finish. But now for another new and slightly specific category. The top 4 mobile games that helped me cope with overwhelming stress and discomfort in 2024. This one is in no particular order. First up, Sudoku. There are about 1 million Sudoku apps, but this one seems to just be called Sudoku. I guess. I don't know. It's the one that I grabbed when I got my phone. And see, I have this weird thing where instead of doing Sudoku puzzles like here and there to kind of, help keep my brain sharp like a normal person, I get extremely into Sudoku for an extremely short period of time once every few years. Like I said, I had a really stressful move, just like overwhelmingly stressful, selling the house and buying the new one and moving all the stuff. It was a really big ordeal. And during the few days when the final pieces were falling into place, but there was still a really, really big problem to deal with, I very suddenly found myself with this crazy urge to do some Sudoku. And whenever I could grab a spare moment, I would retreat into my phone and obsessively do puzzles, just completely shutting off to the outside world. 100% of my focus on Sudoku. I did it so much, I got up to the expert puzzles before things around me finally settled down. And despite it being a very constant part of my day for a bit, suddenly, I'm talking instantly, my desire for Sudoku entirely evaporated. Just poof, up in smoke. I haven't touched it since, but boy, I am thankful it was there for me when it was. Next, we've got Pokemon TCG Pocket. I have not played the actual Pokemon TCG game since I was a kid. So, I thought I'd give this a go, so maybe I could get some videos out of it. There's a nice opportunity to reacquaint myself with the game. A little nostalgia, never hurt anyone. But if you really want to know why I played the game, especially as much as I did, it's because it was on my phone, it was simple, and it was one of the only things I could get myself to do when I was stuck in bed with a nightmarish case of bronchitis for nearly a week. Everything else was too much of a pain, couldn't be bothered to hook up a system or even hold up a switch in front of my face. Reading took too much light, so instead, I just kind of messed around in Pokemon TCG Pocket a bunch. And opening packs and, sometimes getting shiny, cool cards. I mean, that was my medicine during this time. I got one of those Mewtwo's with the extra fancy art where it zooms in all crazy and honestly, I think it helped me hang on just one more day. Not sure if I'd be here now without that Mewtwo pull. Okay, so this bronchitis flu thing got me real bad. I mean, it went all around my town. It just knocks you on your keister for ages. And so naturally, I got super behind on work in November. I've had videos to catch up on, sponsor deadlines to meet, just getting work and my whole life and everything back on track. Incredibly stressful time. So one day I wanted to chill for a bit and play something on my phone while my nephew played Switch, little parallel play, hangout, relaxation time. And I really don't play games on my phone, almost at all. It's just not a thing I'm very interested in usually, but I pulled up the store and immediately saw Vampire Survivors. I mean, it's genuinely one of the best games ever. I certainly understand it now. It's so good. It's such a simple concept, and yet it is so incredibly fun and satisfying. I'm just I don't know, what can I even say? It's Vampire Survivors. It's just a winning formula. I'm baffled by how, obvious it is, and yet it wasn't obvious, apparently, because there was nothing quite like it when it came out. It's just, I don't know, it's just one of those games that delivered just the right experience at just the right time. It is an absolute dopamine wellspring, and its existence has dramatically helped me get through the last few weeks. Oh, and unsurprisingly, my nephew is now absolutely hooked on it, which, hey, gives us a thing that we can play next to each other, so pretty perfect. Okay, so you know how on the mobile version of Vampire Survivors, you can watch an ad to revive or earn extra gold at the end of a run? And how ads are almost always for other mobile games, and sometimes they make you play the stupid games for a minute before you could skip? Well, while I was playing Vampire Survivors, I got an ad for Fruit Merge Juicy Drop game. This is essentially just a ripoff of that watermelon game that was really big on Switch for a bit. And this is another case where it's the simplest idea ever. You feel like there have to be a million games just like this, but for some reason, this exact iteration hit at just the right time, and I literally played the ad version for 10 seconds before I was like, okay, yeah, okay, you got me. This ad has served its purpose. It worked. Yes, give me the game. I actually do want this one. I wanted to get the original that spawned the whole craze, but the reviews for the mobile version mentioned a bunch of problems, so I just got the ripoff one instead and was embarrassingly into it for several days. I don't know what it is. There's just something about this concept of dropping the fruit and watching it combine, and then when things shake up and they I don't know. It's just, I don't know, it's really good. Fortunately, very fortunately, I finally managed to combine 2 watermelons, which, like, the watermelon is the biggest fruit you can get, so then, like, combining 2 of them, it's kind of like the biggest, best thing that you can do. And when I did it, my brain was subjected to a flood of dopamine so huge, it sent me into an ecstatic trance. My eyes rolled up into my head. I lost consciousness for several moments, and when I came to, I found that I was completely done with the game. That was it. That was all I wanted. I combined 2 watermelons, and that was it. Thank you and goodbye, Fruit Merge Juicy Drop Game. All right, that's it for the weird ones. Now that we've gotten through those, we've got a much more solid list of real games, all of which actually released in 2024, with one minor exception. Here we go. My top 5 games of 2024. Starting with number 5, Palworld. I barely know anymore where I stand on the whole Palworld versus Nintendo controversy. Nintendo is being a bully. Pocket Pair stole Pokemon designs. I don't know, whatever. But I played the game early in the year so I could make a video on it. And you know what? It's really fun. It really is a heck of a lot of fun. You know, it was early access, lots of rough edges, clearly a lot of very, like, basic, maybe even stock assets, in need of a lot of work, sure. But man, that core gameplay loop it's incredible. The game really does offer a lot of the freedom that I would love to have in a Pokemon game. You know, it's all the good stuff about Legends Arceus and Scarlet and Violet, but more. Untethered, willing to explore every idea, to give the player countless options. Catching pals and training them to fight and working with them out on the field, but then also using them to work on your base, and you're slowly building up this whole, like, industry of resources. It's immensely satisfying, even in its rough state. Before they added any new content, even without anyone to play with, I spent a good chunk of time on Palworld. Ultimately, I decided to stop playing the game because my Game Pass ran out. But I mean, I was actually kind of glad because I could tell this was the kind of game I really could play for hundreds and hundreds of hours and barely feel it. And if it survives this whole lawsuit and Pocket Pair and Sony keep building it up, I think it's going to be around for a very long time. Obviously, it doesn't completely replace Pokemon, and it certainly doesn't replace turn-based Pokemon combat, but when it comes to, like, the feel of Pokemon, the act of catching and raising and fighting monsters and using them to make yourself stronger, I feel like it absolutely eats a good bit of Pokemon's lunch. I don't know if Pokemon necessarily needs to respond with a similar kind of game, but I think it would probably be wisest to. Honestly, I don't know. This really is something. Number 4 is a game that will probably make its way onto many end-of-year lists, I can imagine. Astrobot is hard to talk about without sounding, you know, exactly like everyone else talking about the game. It's a love letter to classic 3D platforming. It's the kind of fun, straightforward experience this industry needs right now. All that stuff. But, like, yeah, it is hard to not just parrot all the same points because they're true. It is a love letter, taking all the best qualities of 3D platformers and boiling it all down into a frictionless and constantly enjoyable experience. And in a world where games are getting so big and complex, and there's this big push for live service games and crazy monetization and just all this drama, it is nice to have a game like this that's just plain fun. Astrobot is a true Nintendo-style game, both in its design philosophies and its sheer quality. It's polished to a blinding shine. The controls are simply perfect. Every mechanic is fun. The level design is terrific. Oh, and that presentation. Both art style and performance are flawless. The frequent use of hundreds, if not thousands, of individually moving objects, along with the incredible haptic feedback, just makes the game feel like one giant toy. It's a big party. It's this silly, colorful, uplifting experience that simply begs you to pick up the controller again. One more time. Ooh, one more time. What's that? You 100%ed the game a week ago? Doesn't matter. Just pick it up. I don't know. Just do it again. And as I said in my review, it was the first game my 5-year-old nephew really got into. Like, essentially his first game. You might remember how he was having a hard time jumping over the floating platforms at the beginning of the level, and like he needed help. When you first learn to play games, making that connection in your brain that allows you to jump and move at the same time, like, it can take a while. Yeah, so I caught up with him to see how he was doing about a month after the game launched, and here's what I saw. So yeah, I don't know, Astrobot. It's a good game. Next, in the number 3 spot, we've got Shadow of the Erdtree. Oh no. Controversy. That is not a game, sir, but merely a piece of downloadable content. This list is a sham. Well, however you feel about it being nominated for Game of the Year, I am confident at least putting it on my own list. And that's because it really does feel like a whole game. Yes, it requires the Elden Ring base game, and yes, it's got less content than Elden Ring, but I mean, you're still looking at dozens of hours of content just on your first run. If they had sold this separately and labeled it as Elden Ring 2, I personally would have bought it for full price and been very happy. I mean, Elden Ring was like 3 or 4 games in one, so I don't know, I kind of feel like I owe it to them. Anyway, the world in Shadow of the Erdtree is huge with lots to explore, but even better, it's a lot more layered, way more verticality, way more time spent figuring out how to get from one place to another. Elden Ring's design was great, but you know, there's no doubt it was way more spread out, a little simpler. But Shadow of the Erdtree feels like a bit of a return to the older style of FromSoft world design, and that's just perfect for this relatively smaller follow-up experience. I'll admit, it's not perfect. I could go with just a few more smaller secrets scattered about, and it maybe does rely on reused enemies a smidge too much. But overall, it's fantastic. It's got lots of new enemies, crazy new bosses, really captivating environments. I mean, these games are all about the feel and the lore that's baked into all the locales and visuals, and Shadow of the Erdtree absolutely offers some of the best vibes of the entire Elden Ring experience. It's truly everything I could have possibly wanted in an Elden Ring expansion, and it makes the wait for the inevitable sequel, hopefully inevitable sequel, that much easier to take. Okay, this one's the cheat. Lies of P did not release in 2024, but it did release in late-ish 2023. Come on, that's still pretty close. I mean, for me, especially, I'd say that's fine. So yeah, Lies of P though, ooh, this game, wow. It's a classic Souls-like, very much styled after an actual FromSoft title, and that could have made for an uninspired experience, but here it does not. And that's because the developers simply did such a good job. I mean, they nailed it. They captured that FromSoft quality perfectly, in my eyes. I really mean perfectly. Nearly everything about the game is just as good as I would expect from the masters themselves. The design, the combat, the visuals, everything. I mean, the actual fighting, you know, that's really tough to pull off. But Lies of P, it gets it right. When you dig into the nitty-gritty, you might find a few elements that don't quite line up. It kind of depends on your taste. And it does more or less require you to get used to its parry system, at least on some level, which I did find pretty darn intimidating. But I was able to rise to the challenge and ended up feeling all the stronger for it, because if you can meet the game where it is, it offers an immensely rewarding experience. And the further you go, the more options you open up. Because you see, the developers didn't just ape a standard Souls-like. They really created their own version of that kind of game. They added a wealth of customization and quality of life features that managed to make the game feel unique, like a true iteration of the genre rather than simply a derivative. I mean, the game lets you combine almost any weapon blade with any handle, so you can cook up all sorts of these crazy combinations. And that's just one of the systems it lets you play with. It is a relatively linear experience, with levels more or less having beginnings and ends, but design is very satisfying. Shortcuts are abundant, and there are plenty of reasons to return to earlier areas, so it still feels like a big, connected world. And then conceptually, the idea of this Victorian city filled with automatons, the way it adapts the Pinocchio story, it is all exceedingly clever. I feel compelled to repeat myself. Lies of P is basically everything as good as an authentic FromSoft experience, and I do not say that lightly. It even beats out Shadow of the Erdtree on this list because of how much it impressed me, and how it feels so familiar and yet so fresh and unique. I am simply in love. Even if, beating a dead horse here, but even if the game has the absolute worst name of any video game in the history of video games. This year, I played a game that in many ways rivals, or perhaps even exceeds, the best that Pokémon has to offer. I played a game that could give Mario a run for his money. And I played not one, but two extremely satisfying Souls-likes. And the FromSoft style Souls-like, need I remind you, is very likely my #1 genre at this moment. And yet, it was an unassuming little indie game developed solely by one person that had the greatest impact on me in 2024. Animal Well already looked great on the surface. The visual style was immediately appealing, as was the spooky tone. Early trailers showed off weird, sometimes dangerous animals, and advertising material promised a Metroidvania format with lots of mysteries, so that was already more than enough to get my attention. But I couldn't have possibly anticipated just how effective this game would turn out to be. Older games could get away with being more obtuse, with letting the player struggle to figure things out because there were simply fewer games on the market. Now there's so much to choose from that it is progressively harder and harder to keep a player's attention. It's really hard for a game to expect that extra level of patience and engagement from the player, and also to keep them interested long enough for it all to start finally coming together. Animal Well, for me, is the very definition of that kind of game that is so rare these days. A game that feels so mysterious, that leaves you to figure out almost everything on your own, and yet every moment is a joy. Every discovery an absolute thrill. The game tells you essentially nothing, and yet every step along the way I am ravenous to dig deeper. Even the items you get are filled with mystery, requiring you to experiment and figure out previously unknown uses. Many of these discoveries can dramatically change the gameplay. And accessing new areas or making any kind of new progress, not just because you found a new item, but because you figured out a new way to use an old item? The sense of reward, I mean, it's unmatched. Like, I really feel like this is one of the most satisfying things a video game can possibly do. And Animal Well's world is designed to give you tools and let you play with them, to give you mysteries and wait for you to solve them. The map is so huge, yet the design is so dense and elegant, Everywhere you turn, there is another perfectly tuned, intuitive puzzle. This is genuinely one of the most cleverly designed games I have ever played, full stop. And as you learn the game and the world, all the while you're also navigating these eerie places, never sure if an animal will help you or run away from you or attack you or do nothing. At times, the atmosphere is serene and beautiful. Other times, it's intense and uncomfortable, and there are plenty of genuinely scary moments that rival moments from my favorite horror games. Let me repeat that. Sometimes it is literally as effective as a straight-up horror game to me. And it's this atmosphere and this constant exposure to the unexpected and this masterful design and all these layers and layers of secrets that turn Animal Well into not just a fun game or even a really good game, but one of those deep down experiences that will truly stay with me forever. Summing up my feelings here in what's supposed to be a relatively brief little write-up, it's basically impossible. It's genuinely hard to describe how much this game means to me, how immensely enjoyable it was playing through for the first time. Animal Well is one of my all-time favorite games. It's nearly everything I could want in a game, and it's a game that reminds me why I love video games all over again. So yeah, you bet it was the best thing I played in 2024. There is absolutely no question that Animal Well is my game of the year. So those are the games that helped get me through a very weird 2024. And with everything finally settled down, I think next year is probably going to be a little bit more traditional, and especially with the Switch 2 coming out, it'll probably be a little bit more Nintendo heavy, I imagine. But give me your list, all the games that you enjoyed in 2024, down in the comments. And I love you. Thank you for watching. You're amazing. You're so cool. I'm just so happy to have you here. Thank you. Thank you, I love you.